What's up, everybody? Welcome to the AllSooners Podcast, episode 191. It is Tuesday today, June 6th. We usually podcast on a Wednesday, but this time we push things forward today because, well, let's face it, OU is busy playing softball right now, and the WCWS people forgot to check with us about our busy podcasting schedule, which day would be best. So anyway, Ryan Chapman is in Oklahoma City. He's at Hall of Fame Stadium, getting ready for the Patty Gasso, what would you call it, Champ Series Media Day press conference. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. Later on in the show, segment 3, we're going to be joined by our recruiting analyst, Randall Sweet. He's been out at high school team camps. He's been out at spring football practices. He's been out at scrimmages. But really, Randall has really been spending his time wisely at the Brent Venables Elite Camp, where he has gotten to see I don't know how else to say it, a ton of interesting intel in the recruiting world. You're not going to want to miss that. But first, as we have the last couple of weeks, let's start with softball, Ryan.
Yeah, have they given us anything to talk about, John? I don't know if there's been anything that's gone on since we last reconvened.
Yeah, not much. 59-1. The beat goes on. The beat goes on, right? 59-1. They have won 51 in a row now. I asked you, Ryan, is this team ever going to lose again? And I'm talking about next year as well. It's a little silly, I know, but they're in the championship series, which starts tomorrow night. It's going to be on ESPN, 7 o'clock local, I believe, here in Oklahoma City, against the Florida State Seminoles. Who else would you rather face in the championship series than Florida State?
Yeah, Oklahoma fans everywhere rejoicing. This is not happening in Miami. This is not happening in the Sunshine State. The Seminoles have to come to Oklahoma City, and it's been a fascinating World Series for Oklahoma so far, John. A couple of matchups with Stanford and star freshman Nyjah Kennedy, a romp over 4-seeded Tennessee, who are much more talented than Stanford, as Stanford, much like their football team, refuses to embrace modern offense in the softball world, but in any measure, any means.
What'd you say?
It doesn't matter.
2 tight ends into their batting lineup?
Yeah, they pretty much are just running softball's version of not quite a wing tee, but they're hefty on the tight ends, that offense.
22 personnel.
Yeah, when you've got Nyjah Kennedy and you've seen what she's done to this Oklahoma lineup 2 times through, has given up 4 runs total in about, I think it's 10 innings of work. That's good enough to keep most teams in the game, but Oklahoma finds a way because they've got a star of their own in a much better pitcher in Jordy Ball, who has different ways to attack. She's not given up a run yet in her first World Series appearances while healthy.
Yeah, 14 2/3 innings, Ryan, of scoreless pitching. Three appearances, 2 starts and a relief, and she has not given up a run. And we're sitting here jinxing her. I'm sure everybody's like telling us to shut up, stop talking. No, it's fact. Her scoreless streak goes back to Clemson, 18 and a third innings, I think, where she's facing the best of the best, right? She's facing the best teams that softball has to offer. Has not given up a run in 18 and a third innings. 2 full games. No, 3, going on almost 3 full games for softball, 7 innings, right? What's been the key for Jordy? We got to talk to her last night after the game, and I was a little bit surprised by the lack of punch in her answer.
Well, I think Jordy Ball expects to do this, which is part of, in that press conference setting, things like that. And I asked her on Thursday, hey, against Stanford in that opener, she had 2 runners on in the first inning, 4th inning, 5th inning, fired back, didn't look uncomfortable. And she's just like, those are the moments that are really fun. And she thrives in those moments. It happened again against Stanford as she was working through, this time as the away team, and especially as they got into extras. So any base runner, any hung pitch, 1 mistake, home run can end the game. And Patty Gasso said she was born, she said she literally came out of the womb like ready for these types of moments. And I think that's just what you've seen, that Jordy Ball is this massive competitor. You see it in the way she carries herself and in her strut and all that stuff. But also, here's the other thing. She's got the speed. She can throw it by you. She's got the ability to place the ball anywhere she wants. She can attack all different planes. She's got different kinds of spin. like Canada is sensational, and she's one of the most polished, incredible freshman pitchers I've seen. But she has fastball, rise ball, changeup. That's it. Jordy Ball can attack every area of the strike zone, which is, I think, what is even more difficult to prepare for her. Because for Canada, it's just, can you A, time up with the fastball, and B, be disciplined enough to not chase the rise ball? And Oklahoma's hitters, for the most part, were not able to do those two things.
Yeah, I think she said she's been delivering since she was delivered from the womb, and that's incredible. Jordy says that she just tries to simplify things and be in the moment. It's like, that's it? That's your secret? Really? I mean, I've tried that before, and it doesn't work for me. I'm hardly an elite athlete, right? But Patty, I thought the most interesting thing she said yesterday is this was one of those, like, I didn't see it in print. Maybe I missed it. I missed a couple of things, I'm sure. But it felt like, at the time, it felt like something really profound, but it didn't get a lot of traction when she said it. It was, she said, this team is special. They do special things. They're together. They're this, they're that. She said, but what we're going to remember when we join back here and have a reunion in 10 years is not all those run rules. We're not going to remember all those run rules where we just beat somebody to, beat somebody's brains out or whatever. That's me, not her. She said, the ones we're going to talk about are these ones out here. There's 2-0 and the 4-2 and surviving when it's 100 degrees down on the field. I thought that was really profound.
Yeah, I think the reason maybe it wasn't spread out a lot is because Patty Gasso said that multiple times over the last 3 years that I've covered her, is that, and this has been issue's not the right word, but maybe a more of a conversation as Oklahoma has really kicked up the run rules post-COVID 2021s when this huge onslaught really came. And that's what Patty Gasso was talking about, that when they get together, like you mentioned, she's like, we're going to talk about the funny dugout moments that kept us grounded when the pressure was sky high and things like that. And I think when you pair that part, like an embracing of the moment with, it's not just an embrace, but she's also talked a lot about how this team doesn't have a fear of losing. They don't want to lose. They understand that losing's part of the game. They understand that failure is part of the game, but they don't have this fear of it, which makes it where they are now free to just go out and enjoy those moments and try to perform. And it wasn't always perfect. We'll get to it, but Tiare Jennings' day was far from perfect heading into that ninth inning, right? But she wasn't worried about it. It was calm, cool, collected, and she came up with a huge double that she's going to remember on her 21st birthday for a very long time, despite the fact that she was 0 for 4 coming into that last at-bat for her.
I need to know whose birthday is next on this team, if there's any coming up over the next 2 or 3 days, because every time somebody has a birthday, something amazing happens.
Yeah. Patty and Tiare have had a pretty good week for birthdays, don't you think?
Right. Yeah, for sure. What did she have? 4 strikeouts yesterday?
She just had two yesterday, but if you blend the Thursday performance against Stanford and then yesterday's, it was 4 strikeouts total to Canada.
Yeah, and 0 for 4 in yesterday's game before coming up in the 9th inning. How about Grace Lyons, though? That's an absolute slump buster. I looked it up. There's a page in their bio that tells you their season batting average after every game. After every game, their new batting average is posted over here to the right. And I looked it up, and she was at some point in late February, I think, batting 500. 500! And that thing has dipped and dipped and dipped, and she has struggled in the postseason. She got down to 323 yesterday. And then she comes up in the 9th inning and just absolutely blasts a double to get it started. And, I take pictures for AllSooners at the Women's College World Series, so I'm down there in the photo well. And I'm following Grace because I had a feeling that something big was going to happen. So I'm following Grace through the viewfinder, right? And I'm snapping photos, and I can tell, obviously, her ball. I'm not following the ball out here. I'm following her. So I'm looking through, and I can tell something good has happened because her smile just takes, and she's like, "Oh, I finally got a hit." You could just tell it was like a weight off her shoulders.
Yeah, what a time for her first hit of the Women's College World Series, of this year's Women's College World Series. But it's really interesting for Grace because we can dive into this a little bit more with looking at the bottom of the lineup. But while she is 1 for 5 at the Women's College World Series, she's still drawn 3 walks. So she's found ways to be on base. A couple of those walks came against Tennessee. So she was helping contribute to that big onslaught. But yeah, you mentioned just calm, cool, collected, no moments too big for him. Grace Lyons is kind of that kind of player, right? This is not a negative. She's not the fiery persona of Riley Boone or Jada Coleman or Alyssa Brito. She's just the center. It feels like that she's centered and the team is centered around Grace Lyons. And so when she pops up and leads off an inning like that, that's how you just kind of look up and go, yeah, some runs are probably going to get plated here.
Yeah. Am I right? The last 5 OU home runs have been hit by Jennings, Coleman, and Kinsey Hansen? Does that sound right?
Certainly feels right. Yeah, because
I'm just saying somebody else at some point in this lineup, whether it's Haley Lee or whoever, Grace, whoever, needs to hit a home run. It feels like there's I don't know, like a restriction or some kind of tie down going on where it's like nobody can hit home runs except these 3.
Yeah, well, and that's what is going to be scary for a Florida State, that Oklahoma has breezed is not the right word, but I've never felt truly like Oklahoma was going to lose at this Women's College World Series in any of these games. Alyssa Brito hasn't delivered.
Yesterday.
Now,
bottom of the 7th, 2-1. Come on.
Stanford can't score. Like, seriously, they scored 4 runs the entire trip through the World Series. Like, you have to score. Like, 2 runs does not beat Oklahoma. They got 2 runs off of Kennedy both times. But Brito hasn't delivered the power yet at the Women's College World Series. Hansen hasn't delivered the power yet at the Women's College World Series. Haley Lee hasn't delivered the power yet at the Women's College World Series. These are key cogs of the Oklahoma lineup, and they have scored. Them in Florida State, as you would expect, are the top 2 scoring offenses here at the Women's College World Series, along with Tennessee. And the heart, like that middle of Oklahoma's lineup, isn't even delivering the power right now.
Something I want to go back to that you touched on, the bottom of Oklahoma's lineup, Ryan. You wrote a story about it today. As you said in the headline, it sets them apart. Their bottom of the lineup continues to produce base runners and runs and walks and emotion and momentum for the rest of the lineup. And you see it in other teams that when they get to the bottom of the lineup or they turn it over and get to the top with nobody on base, it's a struggle for them to continue that offensively. What makes Oklahoma so good at that?
Yeah, really, I was sifting through some of the box scores from all the games at the Women's College World Series. In Tennessee's opener, a lot of their damage, that 10-5 win over Alabama, came from the bottom 3 of their lineup. That's it, though. Everybody else, it's just been what you kind of expect. Whereas you look at Oklahoma, here's just the raw numbers, Hoove. The bottom 3, Torres, Lyons, Boone, with 1 pinch hit appearance from Avery Hodge. They are 9 for 21. They have scored 7 of the 15 runs. 7 of the 15 runs that have crossed home plate have been the bottom 3 that are on base. 3 walks, 3 RBIs through 3 games. That's your 7, 8, and 9 hole hitter. And that's kind of, we talked about Jordy Ball, but frankly, Jordy Ball for me has been the best pitcher at the Women's College World Series, but there have been a lot of really good pitchers. Ashley Rogers at Tennessee was sensational when she was in the circle. Kat Sandercock is doing Kat Sandercock things. We talked about Canada. None of those teams have the bottom of this lineup, and that's why Jada Coleman said after that Stanford game 1, where it was an Alina Torres single and then a Riley Boone single, those were the 2 base runners for Jada Coleman for her to bring those 2 runs around. Riley Boone, Jada Coleman said, is when she just starts getting excited and pumping her fist and getting going, that's what really sparks that momentum. And you saw it in that first Stanford game. Boone, she lifts it, and I think she was going to left field, and it was pretty clear right off the bat it was going to drop in, just a shallow single, nothing more to it. Before she even gets to the bag, she's jumping up and down, and you see her hair going everywhere before she's even safe at first for the single. Like, that's the kind of energy and juice that lineup's brought, and that's why, like, Karen Weekly, Tennessee's head coach, was like, yeah, it's really tough to get momentum back against Oklahoma because it's great hitters at every single spot. It's not your typical 7, 8, 9 hole.
Yeah, she's right. You're right about that. So they're playing Florida State for the national championship. Florida State, Florida State's Florida State. They're one of the elite all-time programs in softball history. Tell us about the rematch, Ryan. You mentioned Sandercock. I'm thinking she's probably going to get the start. I would think maybe both games, depending on how the first game goes. But you're talking about 7 o'clock tomorrow night, 6:30 the night after, and then game 3, if there is a game 3, will be at 7 o'clock. All games will be on ESPN.
Yeah, it'll be Kat Sandercock and then the freshman McKenna Reed. Those are the two in the circle for Florida State. And Lonnie Alameda last night after the win over Tennessee had talked about getting Kat Sandercock to buy into this staff approach, basically trying to say, we want you to be as fresh as possible headed to Oklahoma City. We also need you to be able to bring along the freshmen because it's got to be more than you. So those are the two that you're going to see in the circle. The good news for Oklahoma is if you go back to the 2021 Women's College World Series, that was the champ series, 3 games against Florida State there. There was a game earlier this year. So if you look at some of the Tiare Jennings, Jada Coleman, Grace Lyons, Kinsey Hansen, those players have all seen plenty of Kat Sandercock in person. So they kind of know what to expect. That doesn't mean that they're going to immediately have a ton of success. She's a really good pitcher, but that means that they're familiar with that matchup. Then McKenna Reed, the freshman, that's kind of the new thing. And the good news for Oklahoma is because Florida State was the first team to really intentionally say, we're going to pitch a bunch of pitchers and not really go all the way through the lineup. Oklahoma has had at-bats this year against pretty much every Florida State pitcher they should see in this series because there was that midweek game all the way back in March, a Tuesday night. It was 5-4. Alex Storako got the start for Oklahoma. She went 4-ish innings, and then Jordy Ball came in. Katie Dack had hit the go-ahead home run. It was 4-3 Florida State in the 4th inning at Marita Hines Field. Then Haley Lee, Tiare Jennings deliver immediately in the bottom of the 4th, and it was the Jordy Ball show from there. So this is a Florida State team that has power. They don't have the same kind of power that Tennessee brought to the table, but they've seen Jordy Ball a little bit this year. They also, for me, Florida State's lineup is a lot more balanced from top to bottom. Tennessee, once you get out of that first 4, kind of dips a little bit. Florida State, you're not going to have as much power as Tennessee, but it's much steadier top to bottom. And much like the Oklahoma teams of old, the pre-2021 Oklahoma teams, Lonnie Alameda excellent with the hit and runs, playing small ball, all the plays on the card that Patty Gasso's talked about. I don't know if I can call that because if I get a runner thrown out, then we hit a home run. I turned a 2-run shot into a solo bomb. Patty Gasso's kind of iffy on that stuff. Lonnie Alameda is going to be aggressive on the base paths.
It's going to be worth going to. It's going to be worth buying a ticket to sit in the heat or the evening sultry storms that we're going to have to face. Ryan, golly, storms literally every day. We had a rain delay yesterday. Immediately after the game was over, it was like everybody has to leave the stadium. I mean, I guess that's what we're in for when you play in softball games in June in Oklahoma City. It's just nothing new. So. Folks, Ryan has done an unbelievable job bringing you wall-to-wall coverage of that thing. It's going to continue. He's there again today at the press conference. He's going to talk to Lonnie Almeida and Patty Gasso. Obviously, he's going to be bringing you all the coverage leading up to the championship series, and then we'll have a full team there tomorrow night. I'll be there. Ross will be there. And, of course, Ryan will be there as well. And I'm fired up about it, Ryan. I want to do when we get back, I want to talk a little more softball. And I want to ask you a question about Tiare and Jada Coleman and how all they know, and Nicole May as well, all they know in that class is winning national championships. I don't know if that's going to change this year or not. We'll see over the next 3 days. But that's a topic worth exploring. So we'll have more softball when we come back. Plus, the SEC had its spring business meetings last week. Commissioner Greg Sankey absolutely flexed on the rest of college football last week. Plus, depending on where you stand with the 8-game schedule versus 9-game schedule in conference play. The Sooners either got some good news or some bad news. Again, that's depending on your perspective. That's all next on the AllSooners Podcast. On Twitter, you can give us a follow at all_Sooners. Don't type the word underscore. Underscore is like the dash that goes under everything. It underscores. All_Sooners. I'm at John E. Hoover. Ryan's at _Ryan Chapman. You got to type that underscore.
Do type underscore in when you're looking for me on Twitter, though. For
right.
all_Sooners, it's just the character. For mine, though, it's literally the word _Ryan Chapman.
No, it's not. Follow Ross over at Ross Lovelace, and Randall is at Randall Sweet, the number 5. Follow him for all the latest recruiting news. We'll talk to Randall in the third segment about his big week and weekend covering OU camp. I didn't even know you could cover that stuff. I knew people did it. I thought it was against the rules, Ryan. And I come to find out it's like, we have no rules. If you want to come cover camp, come cover camp. I'm like, what? All these years I could have been covering camp. Sounds fun, doesn't it? Our website is allsooners.com. We are a Fan Nation affiliate, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Remember, All Sooners is free. No memberships, no usernames, no passwords, no credit cards. All free at All Sooners. Nicole May thought she was fantastic yesterday. Ryan, I was a little worried for her that it was not going to go well. You know, she's had an unbelievable season, and she should be applauded for it. And I remember Patty at Media Day way back in February said, I think Nicole May is going to have her best season, and she has absolutely had her best season. She's been amazing. But when you get to the College World Series and it's Jordy Ball, and I don't know, I'm probably over analyzing this. I'm reading too much into it. I didn't see the usual body language in Nicole being she came in and pitched, I think the last inning of that third game, or the second game, the Tennessee game.
The last two batters, and kind of that weird where Stracco had 2 batters, Deal had 1, and then May had 2.
So usually with Nicole May, you see a real kind of flat, even-keeled demeanor, nothing expressive in her face. But when she's in the dugout, she's doing a lot of dancing and singing and cheering and all this chanting and stuff. I didn't see a lot of that other stuff as all this attention was being put on Jordy Ball. So I was a little worried that maybe her body language was down. I don't know what the terminology is or the psychology, but I was thinking she needs to have a really good start here. She needs to get out of the gate really strong, first inning, 2-run home run. And I just thought, I guess it's Jordy Ball time. Patty Gasso thought differently.
Yeah, and she had talked about after the game, Patty and Jordy, because that's who we got. Nicole May was in the post game. That the plan was for Nicole May to hopefully give Oklahoma 5 innings, and they were game planning for a 7-inning ball game. So if Nicole May could give them 5 innings, keep the pitch count down on Jordy, then she can come in for the last 2. That would be ideal, and that's been something that the criticism, I guess, of Nicole May the last 2 years heading into this year has been, she's great, but sometimes she issues a few extra walks or something like that, and she makes life a little bit more difficult. That way, what should have been a 2-out single turns into a 1-out single, and suddenly you got runners on first and third. She's pretty much eliminated that this year. Heading into yesterday, she had a better ERA than Jordy Ball and the identical whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitched. They were both at 0.83, so basically 0.8 walks or hits given up per inning. Which is why I think that Patty Gasso was fine to say Stanford had 3 hard hit balls on Nicole May in the first inning. That was all it was. And then she immediately retired 13 straight batters. And I think that it became really easy for Patty Gasso to say, okay, it's just 2 runs. It's going to take more than 2 runs to beat Oklahoma. So she comes back out in the second and she retires the side in order. Then in the third, she retires the side. Like Nicole May gave Patty Gasso, outside of making a change after the home run in the first inning, no reason to come and get her except for the second that Stanford beat that, hitless streak, that 14th batter. And then Patty Gasso immediately marched out and said, okay, we've hit that time in the game where we had predetermined I wanted to bring Jordy Ball in. It's Jordy time. Make that thing happen. So Really, if you look at Nicole May's career at the Women's College World Series, she's been excellent outside of one matchup, and she's gotten roughed up twice by UCLA. Stanford, it's not UCLA, and I think you saw one bad inning. Other than that, you'll take 13 straight retired every day and say thank you for gobbling up a ton of innings, and then Oklahoma closed with Jordy.
Yeah, she was terrific yesterday. Nicole was, and she has had her absolute best season. There's no doubt about it. She's a vital piece of this puzzle as Oklahoma goes for its third national championship. She's in that class, Ryan, of juniors now who all they know in college, the only thing that's ever happened to them in college is winning national championships. They've never had to end a season in tears or, oh, we lost, we got beat, we didn't finish our goal. The first 2 years in college, they win the national title. And I'm talking about Nicole, I'm talking about Jada Coleman, and I'm talking about Tiara Jennings, obviously. And whoever else is in that junior class, right? It's a special class. We're talking about some all-timers, Ryan, in those two batters especially. I'm talking about some all-timers, some Tiara yesterday, for instance, set the Women's College World Series record for RBIs, career RBIs. Are you kidding me? And career doubles. Some of the best that have ever played the game are currently in the same class at OU right now. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was something that I was talking with somebody, I forget who it was yesterday, that last year Tiara Jennings set not a career record, but for one Women's College World Series, one event, she set the RBI record of that last year, which is why she is your career RBI leader at the Women's College World Series after yesterday. But that was something that wasn't really talked about a ton, because we were talking about Joss Sonalo. We were talking about, is this the greatest team you've ever seen? And how did Oklahoma just win a national title without Jordy Ball? Like all of that stuff. It's been incredible to see what Coleman and Jennings and you saw that 1-2 punch yesterday created the huge dilemma for Jessica Allister, Stanford's head coach, of do you walk Coleman to get to Jennings? And I thought her answer after the game was pretty straightforward. It's that they like the righty-on-righty matchup, and so there's not a good answer of pitching to Coleman or pitching to Jennings, but the better answer for Stanford was that one of them was a right-handed batter, and they would rather get to that matchup, and it burned them. That made, just at face value, a lot of sense, but you see that, and who, frankly, we can expand this thing a little bit too. Ready? Those three have never had their season end in anything other than a national championship, but if you look to the class before them, Riley Boone, Kinsey Hansen, those two came in 1 year before. The only thing that has ever happened to them other than winning a national championship is COVID ending their season, right? And so even those two haven't gone to the Women's College World Series and had their season end in defeat on that field. Now, Oklahoma was not trending in that direction in 2020 before COVID killed that season. They were plagued with a ton of injuries, but it's kind of just a weird sense of that those five that are key pieces to this team have been through multiple runs with this Oklahoma team. And when the NCAA tournament has happened, they've never crashed out of it.
Yeah, I can't wait, Ryan. It's going to be fun to get back to the stadium and cover that. I just sense so much tension in the air between OU and Florida State fans. Yesterday there was an actual skirmish in the stands while I'm relocating between innings. It was after the Stanford coach yelled at the umpire and got reprimanded for the delay of Kinsey Hansen calling time right before a pitch. People got mad, and I was walking from one area of the photo section to another area, and I was on the concourse, and I got shoved out of the way. I got shoved out of the way by two people that wanted to fight each other. And there were cooler heads that were stepping in and saying, stop. And I was like, do I stand here and take pictures of this and possibly get blood all over me? Or do I go down to the photo well and get the hell out of here? So I got the hell out of here. You know me, I'm a chicken.
You protect the glass. That's the important thing.
Protect the glass. Yes, I do not want any. This is my camera. This camera does not belong to corporate. It belongs to me. So, no, they had their fist doubled and they were pushing each other in the chest and they were going after each other. And I'm like, this is impressive. These fans are angry enough about a softball game to fight each other. So I'm not calling for fights in the stands, but when OU and Florida State get together, Ryan, I could see the same thing happening tomorrow. It gets intense down there.
No, absolutely. You're right, boss. And here's the other thing, too. If you've ever been to this event, you know the Thursday, Friday into the weekend, there's a ton of travel ball teams around. If you look into the outfield bleachers, I liken it to looking at an M&M's bag or a Skittles bag, because if the travel ball team, if they're all green, then you see a whole row of green, and then 2 rows above them there's a yellow team, and they've a whole row of yellow. That all leaves at the weekend, and when we get into Monday semifinals, there's a little bit of that spilled over. When you get into Wednesday, Thursday, and possibly Friday, the Champ Series, there are 2 groups of people here: the friends and family of those players from Florida State, and 12,000 Oklahoma fans. That's it. The travel ball teams are gone. It's one of those things that the real advantage, the real fan environment, does not fully take hold until the championship series. I remember, John, in 2021, these 2 teams met, and before the game, we had the windows in the press box open, and it was the first base side. All the Oklahoma fans yell "Boomer." Down the third base side, they reply with "Sooner," and it felt like a football game. That's what Patty Gasso had said. It felt like when she's on the field before a football game, and you have both halves of the stadium going at. It's no longer the Sooners come out of the dugout and yell "Boomer," and 2,000 fans around the stadium say "Sooner," and it's all, the left field starts at a different time than the parents. Like, that's not what happens. So that's going to get ratcheted up, and it'll be interesting to see how Florida State handles that, considering a lot of those players have been there and done that in 2021 and actually won a game against Oklahoma in that Champ Series.
Yeah, that was 21 you were talking about. I remember that very well. I was impressed because there was Lauren Chamberlain and all that group of former players on one side, and they would split up and they would go over to the other side of the stadium, and so one side would start the cheer "Boomer" and the other side would start the cheer "Sooner," and it was impressive coordination and thundering volume. Let's talk some football, shall we? You mentioned football. Let's talk some football. How do we quantify Greg Sankey at this point? Is he the Sooners' future commissioner, I guess, is what we're talking about? Because he took a flex this week that was damn impressive. I could never see Bob Bowlesby or Dan Beebe or Kevin Weiberg or any of those guys flex like this. And that was, it was pretty simple. Somebody was asking him about, hey, Commissioner Sankey, if you guys go 8 games, there's going to be a perception that you guys are running from competition. Everybody else is playing 9-game conference schedules. The SEC is only playing 8. The SEC is going to maintain that November cupcake schedule stuff. Greg Sankey says, I think we ended that football season last year with a 65-7 win in the national championship game. If the indictment somehow is going to be that we don't play the highest level of college football, somebody's not actually watching football games. Oh, my God. Greg Sankey just took a flamethrower to the rest of college football and the Big 12 and whoever else wants to complain about an 8-game conference schedule.
Yeah, I don't think Oklahoma needs to split hairs on future commissioner, current commissioner. I think that Greg Sankey, no matter who is talking about them, simply just needs to refer to him as the college football godfather, because that's what he's doing right now. He was throwing shade at Kevin Warren last summer, and guess what? Kevin Warren's now with the Chicago Bears, and now Sankey's just like, we'll do what we want. So, Sankey with the big flex, and frankly, too, I think the other thing is the SEC is not running from competition, not embracing competition. I think that with the determination that they'll play 2024 with an 8-game conference schedule, they basically are maintaining the SEC games are worth X number of dollars. And if ESPN is not going to give us whatever that X number of dollars is, we are not going to cheapen our product by letting ESPN get an extra game without paying for it.
Right. Yeah, and they shouldn't. They've got ESPN's going to come around at some point and say, you know what, this inventory that we're paying for, it would look a lot better if there were 9 instead of 8. We would all make more money if we paid for 9 instead of 8. That's what this boils down to, is how much ESPN is willing to pay. ESPN right now, the way I understand it, is saying, we've got the SEC. We've just paid a bunch of $1 billion to do this. we're going to hang on to this product. And the SEC saying, okay, fine. If you're just paying for the status quo, then we'll give you the status quo, 8 conference games, which sucks for the rest of us who enjoy watching good college football. Am I right? Because nobody wants to watch those November cupcake games.
Yeah, absolutely. But it sounds like heading into these spring meetings that actually happen in June, we need to work on that, fam. Heading into these meetings, Ross Dellinger had been doing a lot of reporting, and we finally got a number. He got an anonymous SEC source to tell him $5 million a year per school is what that school was valuing the extra conference game. And with everything going on in ESPN right now, the really ugly business stuff, the layoffs and all that, guys, just look back a couple of weeks ago when ESPN announced a huge round of layoffs and then in the same breath said, and we're going to spend a ton of money on the Pat McAfee show, just how they got hammered. I don't think in 2024, like heading into this 24 slate, ESPN's equipped to pay, if that is, $5 million more per school in one hand, and on the other hand, have another round of layoffs. So that's why Sankey and everyone's maintained that just because they said 8 conference games in 24, that doesn't necessarily mean 8 conference games in 2025, doesn't mean 8 in 2026. But when you look at it, I think it would make the most sense. The new college football playoff contract will come in after the 2026 playoff, right? Like we're going to have a couple years of this expanded playoff, and then technically it could change a little bit again. I think the SEC would be wise to sit and see, okay, are we sticking with the top 4 conference champions get buys? Are we moving to just the top 4 teams get? But what else? Like define what the next 10 years of the sport are going to look like, and then you can go to ESPN and say 8 or 9 games. Give us the dollar figures.
That's a good point. I think the 8-game schedule, the way Ross Dellinger reported it, is they simply didn't have enough votes to move to 9. And the reason they didn't have enough votes, and this is the part that agitates me, Ryan, is there are a bunch of coaches right now who have it written into their contract. If you make a bowl game, you'll get an extra amount of money. And there are a bunch of coaches right now who are saying, I need to make a bowl game. Whether it's $1 million bonus or $500,000. Coaches are saying, I need to make a bowl game. And the easiest way to make a bowl game is to play some rum-dum in November if you're in the SEC. So you're trying to get to a bowl game. You're trying to get as many teams in your conference as possible to be bowl eligible. That's fair. That's what everybody would want. But what's going to be best for the conference? What's going to be best for all 16 teams? Is it going to be 12 teams making a bowl game and a couple of teams down at the bottom winning that extra game and getting into a bowl game and getting that extra little bowl payout, that little bowl payout at the bottom of the bowl payout structure? Or what's going to be better, that or getting that 4th team, or in some cases maybe a 5th team, into your college football, 12-team college football playoff, and getting that money off the top of the bowl pile and the postseason payout that happens. You get that money off the top, you're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars that everybody gets to share. And, oh, sorry about you. You didn't make a bowl game. You went 5-7. Sorry, but you still get, $11 million that you wouldn't have gotten before. Or whatever the total number is. How short-sighted is that? I'm sure I'm oversimplifying things. There's other things at play. But that's just, to me, that's short-sighted. We need more bowl-eligible teams. We need more teams with 6 wins. That's bullcrap. Who cares about 6 wins? You want to win national championships? You're the SEC. Get as many teams into the SEC as you can by fortifying that conference schedule and losing that stupid FCS November game.
Yeah, as I sit here in Hall of Fame Stadium, Patty Gasso's words ring true in my brain of the best way to prepare for these big moments is to test yourself during the regular season. So I absolutely agree with that. And for clarity, I want a 9-game schedule. I wish we could see a 9-game schedule. But I think part of the flip side of that is if you want to talk about the top of the league, this is why I think it would make sense to wait until 2026 and see what happens. Because you could make the argument that if in 2026 they lock into the exact same playoff model, where the top 4 conference champions get buys and nobody else does, then you could say, hey, the mighty SEC, we could have the top 10 teams in college football and only one of them's going to get a bye. So why wouldn't we just say play the 8 conference game schedule? If we can't be rewarded for being better than the other 3 conference champions, mitigate and limit the variables for why a team might not make the college football playoff, right? And just say, hey, we're going to lean on the SEC schedule. We already get the respect, stuff like that. Then suddenly, if it becomes a free-for-all on the buys, maybe you want a 9-game schedule because you want Alabama and Georgia and LSU and Vanderbilt because suddenly they've risen from the ashes. If the only losses for those 4 programs are to each other, then you can easily make the thing of like, nobody outside the SEC can beat us. Yes, Georgia has 2 losses on this schedule, but their losses are to Alabama and LSU, who are also 2 of the top 4 teams. Let's get us all these buys and all that stuff. Like I could see the business side of that going both ways at the top, but I think we should simplify it and just be like, play the 9 games like everybody else. That's what we want.
Yeah, apples to apples, 9-game schedule to 9-game schedule. That's the way I want to see it. The SEC doesn't need to be playing 8. And I know what Sankey said. Holy cow. The score of that Georgia-TCU game was obscene enough that we all know what he's talking about. The SEC is the SEC. The SEC champion is the SEC champion, right? It's not anything that's people aren't going to run away from. Oh, well, Georgia only played 9 games, or Georgia was the only team to beat that team. They lost 2 games. They're going to be out. It's a tangled mess. It could be a tangled mess. It doesn't have to be. Compare 9-game schedules to 9-game schedules. Speaking of 9-game schedules, Bob Bowlesby and the Big 12 were one of the first teams to say we're going to play a round robin because that's the way it needs to be done. That's really was their only option when it happened. Big 12 contraction, you remember that. Well, Big 12 is still talking about expansion. Brett Yormark had a press conference, virtual press conference over the old Zoom. Him and Lawrence Skubanek, the Texas Tech chancellor president, had a little press conference, and they talked about, hey, we're not possibly for real forever done expanding. We could expand more. And he actually got a question about Gonzaga being a basketball only member. And it was for instance, it was an example, but he said, absolutely. No, that's something that's on the table. Expanding and adding basketball only members.
Well, what is the point of conference expansion right now? And the point of the Big 12 is trying to stabilize that money, like you just said. So if bringing in Gonzaga gets the Big 12 some sort of revenue stream and it doesn't dilute their football money, then sure, go for it. I also think no one should be shocked that where is Brett Yormark from? Oh, Big East country. You remember that? Remember that conference? Is that conference still around, by the way? Oh, the basketball-only conference is dead. My fault. But UConn, another name that keeps getting, moved around. Gonzaga. Shouldn't shock anyone that Brett Yormark might be trying to rechart the Big East. The important thing they have, though, is they do have football teams that are frisky and competitive to prop them up. But it feels like the Big 12 right now is playing a different game than the SEC and the Big 10, which is an understanding of we're never going to get viewed as the prime football conference. So we can have really, really good football still. We just had a team in the national championship game in TCU, right? Kansas State, really good program under Kleiman. And then you add in and be the SEC of basketball as their way forward. That's a much more appealing pitch to any media partner than anything that the ACC or the Pac-12 is throwing at, because both of those conferences right now are just holding on for dear life trying to keep their teams. No one's talking about the Big 12 getting poached right now.
Yeah, you're right. Arizona State are being tossed out there. There was a rumor last week that Colorado's rejoining the conference. It's like the 5th time that's happened, but I'll believe it when I see it on Colorado. You mentioned you used the word basketball as a revenue stream. That's a perfect example of what basketball is. You make your money in football, and then you got this little revenue stream over here called basketball. Big 12 can do that. Big 12 Gonzaga can maybe bring something, and I'm not knocking Gonzaga at all. They don't have football, fine, whatever. They have the opportunity to possibly join the Big 12 and create a revenue stream for the conference and the other schools. Brett Yormark is admittedly a basketball junkie. He loves hoops. He's created an initiative in Rucker Park for the Big 12. I mean, he is literally addicted to basketball. And he said the words, "We know football drives the ship or drives the revenue," or whatever, however he phrased it. I don't know, Ryan. We just got done talking about Greg Sankey saying, what, 65-7's not enough for you to show how great we are at football? Yeah, we might invite Gonzaga as a basketball school. That's a nice little revenue stream. It's like you said, two different games. They're playing two different conference matchups. They're playing two different games, the Big 12 and the SEC.
Yeah, and I mean, the Big 12 is all about right now acknowledging there's going to be a large revenue gap to the SEC. So how can you just get it as close as possible so that your institutions can try and, hey, Chris Kleiman, you're doing a great job. Maybe we can't pay you the $10 million that pick random bottom tier SEC schools. Say Lane Kiffin decides to leave and Ole Miss wants Chris Kleiman, and Ole Miss is like, we're going to throw $10 million a year at you. If Kansas State can just go to Chris Kleiman and say, okay, we can't match the 10, but you already have facilities you like here. You don't have to start from scratch. You've got a program that you've already sunk a lot of time into. You've got the connections. How close do we need to get for you to want to stay? That's the game the Big 12 is playing right now on the football front. Yeah. And any extra revenue, whether it be basketball or anything like that, will help the Big 12 try and just close that gap enough, because they're not going to make the same amount of money, but they don't necessarily have to. They just have to make enough to keep their talent around and to say, you've already got something good here. How much is that worth to you, as opposed to having to start over in a place you don't know?
Less than 13 months is when Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC, Ryan. 13 months and counting. The Big 12, when you talk about revenue distribution, the Big 12 did say last week at its spring business meetings that they're distributing an all-time record $440 million to the 10 schools that were in the conference last year. $440 million divided by 10 is $44 million apiece. That's more than they've ever made. That's great. You're making more than you ever made. Year before it was 42.6. So they're incrementally creeping up a little bit. Bob Bowlesby said last year COVID didn't hit us as hard as we thought it would, so they were able to mitigate some of those losses. The SEC in February, they paid out $721.8 million, which spread among 14 schools, Ryan, is $49.9 million. So one school, one conference is paying out $44 million to their schools. The other one's paying out almost $50, and they're at a kind of a starting point. Like the Big 12 is adding 4 new schools that some say have diluted the product. Big 12 is trying to expand to find other revenue streams. Meanwhile, the SEC just signed a billion deal with the ESPN, and $49.9 million is going to quickly turn into 50, 60, 70 million. 80 million is what the projections are. I think I've seen 84.5 million. 5 years from now, Ryan, are these going to even resemble each other? Are they going to look like the same thing, the Big 12 and the SEC?
No. If you look at the Athletics run a bunch of studies on this, or they've reported on a bunch of studies. I don't know who exactly it came from, but the projections are by like 2035, the SEC making over $100 million per year per school, and the Big 12 making 50 or 60. So right now we're talking about, 5 to 10 million before your third tier rights. In a decade, we could be talking about 30 to 40 million before your third tier rights. Like, that is what the worry is. In the Big 10, they've got an even better deal. They're actually going to make a little bit more than the SEC, but the Big 10 and the SEC right now is going to be the gap that's between the SEC and the Big 12. Like, that gap today, SEC and Big 12, is what the Big 10 SEC gap is going to look like in 10 years, but it's going to be tens and 20s and 30s of millions of dollars between the SEC, the Big 10, and everybody else. And that's why you've got ACC schools saber rattling. That's why USC and UCLA looked around. Nope, we're out. That's why Oklahoma and Texas said, yes, we will head to the Southeastern Conference. It's going to be a lot like we haven't felt the effect of the budget differences, and it won't happen till like a decade, but it was a position for the future. And that's what Joe Castiglione and Joe Harris talked about when Oklahoma to the SEC, that news broke.
Yeah, good. Well said. One actual football note before we take it to break, and that is Oklahoma has 3 on the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame this year. 3 Sooners on the ballot. And they, frankly, let's be honest, they could have 5 or 6 at a program like this. Josh Heupel, Rocky Kelmus, and Dewey Selman. My first question is, how the hell is Dewey Selman not in the College Football Hall of Fame already? Was he overlooked? Did somebody – Dewey has been waiting in line a long time. Dewey needs to go in post-haste. Rocky Kelmus is a Hall of Famer. Josh Heupel is a Hall of Famer. If they're only going to do one, I say start with Dewey and bring up the rear with those other guys next year.
Yeah, if you can only do one, let's just go chronological order, knock that thing out. But
Yep.
Yeah, all 3 very deserving, and this is what is so cool about being able to cover a place like Oklahoma is you've got now the whatever the legislated, it has to be this number of years since your career wrapped and all that stuff. That's coming around. It feels like now for the start of this most recent era of Oklahoma football, we're getting the early Stoops teams finally in consideration, things like that, which means that over and over and over, you're going to have your Roy Williamses that we've talked about. You're going to have in it soon your Adrian Petersons, your Sam Bradfords. We're going to work into those days soon. And I guess that's a lot of trips between, is it what, Atlanta, where the actual Hall of Fame is, and Las Vegas, where the inductions are happening?
Yeah, Vegas is where the big party is. Imagine that.
I'll cover the brick and mortar induction like site in Atlanta, and we can send you to Las Vegas for all the stuff. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, we could do that. The deal in Atlanta, I don't know if you've ever been, Ryan, is amazing. The actual Hall of Fame itself.
Oh yeah, you could if you ever rolling through. I've been, I think, 3 times, and I think I like the people every single time. They're like, hey, it's 6 p.m. You got to go, buddy. And I'm just like, but all the new stuff you have on display. This was not here last year when I was here.
Yeah. The interactive stuff is amazing. There's every Hall of Famer has an interactive display where you can go to, you push a button and then you scroll up and then you click on this and then you call up my guy from my university, East Central University, Brad Caleb, is in the Hall of Fame. And they have little photos and videos playing on the screens of Brad Caleb from back in the 80s. And every one of them, every Hall of Famer, has some kind of interactive display where you can call it up and look at it yourself. It's amazing. It's so cool. So check that out if you get a chance. If you're ever in Atlanta, it's right downtown. A little bit challenging to park sometimes in downtown Atlanta, but it's worth the extra effort. And there's a ton of Sooners. I think there's something like 35 guys now. I can't remember what the number is, but there's 78 players on this year's ballot. Hall of Fame members and National Football Foundation members are going to vote. And my suspicion is that probably Josh Heupel will be the first of these 3 in, because he's got name recognition. He's a head coach at Tennessee. He led the team to a national championship. Bob Stoops came out last year and said he was the most powerful, most vocal leader that he's ever had. So I get it, Heupel, but Dewey Selman's been waiting a long time, and Dewey deserves it. So does Kelmus, for that matter.
I've got simple shorthand. When you played at the University of Oklahoma and they thought that your contributions were good enough to enshrine you in a literal statue outside the stadium at Oklahoma, you should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. You think Adrian Peterson will ever get a statue?
I don't know. Well, I think they're just going to run out of statue real estate, because they got to get to work on softball statues next, because they've got
needs a statue.
They've got Patty Gasso. They've got Players of the Year that need statues. So there's a lot of job security in the statue the statue career path if you're around Norman, America.
That's what I should have been. I should have been a sculptor. God, I missed my calling. Hey, good stuff. We'll wrap up real quick. Baseball lost 2 times to East Carolina over the weekend. It was not pretty. Sooners finished the year 32-28. To me, Ryan, a lot of inconsistent baseball, but you get 11 guys drafted off that College World Series team last year. That was the most of any team in the country. 11 dudes drafted off that CWS runner-up. What can you really expect but maybe inconsistency the next year? And that's kind of what Skip Johnson got. They got an NCAA bid. They won a game. They beat Army 10-1. That's good. Historic year. I mean, you swept Texas for the first time in like forever. That's the highlight for baseball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said it best. When you have that many guys head to the draft, there's got to be an adjustment on your expectations. And to get to the NCAA tournament, win a game, you're in a stacked regional. I think that's fine. And I think, if anything, it's a good thing that there is a small subset of the fan base that I think is a little disappointed with that, because that means that Oklahoma baseball, there was legitimate growth in the fan base with that run to Omaha. You look at the crowds that they had all year long, especially for some of those big series. I think that you saw that that's a legitimate momentum, and I don't think they did anything to really kill that momentum. Sure, a big run would have helped just capitalize and stack on top of it, but I just don't think that was something that was super realistic coming into the year with all the losses. And so to have that group, to get that experience with so many new faces, it's just a great way to say, hey, you didn't lose that momentum from the trip to Omaha, and Skip Johnson can go and recruit off of that, as they got one more year in the Big 12 before they head over to the SEC, which, just like we talked about with the football, is a different animal, and they're going to need the fan support, like week in, week out, because those are going to be tough series every single weekend, but it'll prepare them for future NCAA tournaments.
Yep, you're right. Good stuff, Ryan. Thanks for sitting in these two segments. Don't forget to follow Ryan on Twitter and at AllSooners for all the rest of the College World Series coverage from Oklahoma City. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Hey, next time we get together and talk on the podcast, June 14th, we're going to have to be on the lookout, because that's when Greg Sankey said the SEC matchups for 2024 will be announced. So we won't have like a home and away schedule or like the order of everything. Or actually, we may have home and away. But either way, we'll be able to discuss some theoretical, hypothetical, how is Jackson Arnold going to look in Death Valley? You tell me.
Hey, that reminds me, before we go to break, we talked about Army baseball. What about Army football? If OU is going to play 4 non-conference games in 2024, get Army back on the schedule. Joe C., I know you watch the AllSooners podcast, at least maybe not all of it, but maybe this segment you're watching. Get Army back on the schedule. I want to go to New York. I want to see a football game on the Hudson River.
Yeah, let's do that 100%, because they got to 4 non-conference games. And right now, Oklahoma doesn't have a Power 5 opponent on the books for 2024 as well. So that's something else to look at, is got to add 2 non-conference games, because they've got 2 on the book. I think it's Tulane and Temple. And one of the ads has to be a Power 5 school. So maybe I haven't spent the time to look through all of it, but NC State, I know they've had their schedule bumped with BYU headed to the Big 12. So maybe like pick up an NC State to play a one-off non-conference game.
I'm sure Oklahoma State would be willing to play a game, right? Don't they want to continue the Bedlam series? Like,
sure.
Have I mischaracterized that completely? Oh, it's possible. We'll see. Play Bedlam one more time. Say it's the last Bedlam, and then say, we got to play Bedlam one more time. That would be awesome.
Play it at like Taft Stadium too. Be like, hey, we have to
somewhere in neutral site, Oklahoma City. It would be great, Oklahoma City. Where they play the high school state championships at UCO.
Yes, exactly.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
With the water feature behind, I forget which end zone that is. From the press box, it's the end zone to the right. I don't remember which way the field lays.
Yeah, that would be cool. We'll cut you loose, Ryan. Thanks, man.
We'll see you.
Coming up, it's a huge week for the Sooners in recruiting. Humongous week, actually. If you haven't been keeping up, they got a couple of grad transfer commits from the transfer portal. Unexpected by some, but I guess the portal, if you're a grad transfer, the portal's always open. And I get the feeling there's going to be a couple more. We'll tell you about it next. Plus, AllSooners was out at the Brent Venables Elite Camp. Randall Sweet is going to come back and tell you all about it. That's all next on the AllSooners Podcast. Final segment of the AllSooners Podcast. Again, we really appreciate it if you guys could drop us a rating, rate the podcast. If you like it, hey, nothing wrong with a 5-star rating. Those are awesome, and they help You can like us and share us on social media. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment, subscribe, like, all that stuff. We enjoy interacting with you guys. We want to hear from you on how we're doing. So let us know. Okay, segment 3. Speaking of recruiting, holy cow, Sooners have added to the defensive line lineup, the defensive line roster, I guess. And Randall Sweet is here to talk about it. He's had a super busy last 6 or 7 days of covering recruiting. Funny question I got asked by a contractor who was working at my house. I said, I got to go talk to a recruit. He's thinking about going to OU. And the guy goes, oh, you recruit for OU? No, OU wouldn't let me anywhere near a recruit. I would probably commit 20 violations on the first day, and I wouldn't be very good at it. But no, we cover recruiting. We don't recruit, we cover recruiting. Anyway, 2 big ones. Dejon Terry said his name wrong right off the top. Dejon Terry and Philip Paya. Holy cow, Randall. These are 2 guys that you don't expect to get in June, guys out of the transfer portal, and yet here we are.
Yeah, like you mentioned, big guys, 2 guys that are going to really take up a lot of space in the middle, free up a lot of room for players like Danny Stutzman and whoever plays linebacker next to him to fly downhill, hit the hole, and make some tackles in the backfield. The Sooners lost multiple players at that position over the offseason. Jalen Redmond, very notably. And then I know Corey Roberson hit the transfer portal. They had some other guys leave. So getting two guys that have played, Division I football for years, that are veterans, they know what they're doing. It'll be really helpful for that interior defensive line group.
Yeah, there's been some talk that somebody like a Jacob Lacey might have an issue that could prevent him from playing a full season, if not the entire season. So this is, to me, evidence that that OU coaching staff is not pleased, not content, maybe is a better way of saying it, not content with the roster on the defensive line that they have coming out of spring. They want to add to it, and they did so with a guy who played at Tennessee and Kansas in
Yep.
Terry. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, he's a guy that coming out of high school didn't have the biggest offer list. That's how he ended up at Kansas. But when he hit the transfer portal there, obviously a lot of teams were after him. Tennessee came calling, and it's a pretty big Power 5 school. Now, since he's hit the transfer portal at Tennessee after spending 2 more years at Tennessee, he's got a lot of interest. And so I think there was a big land for the Sooners. He had other Power 5, other SEC schools that were after him. And so, for OU, Todd Bates, Brent Venables to be able to land a guy like that, it really shows that not only are they having success, that they're still seen as very good recruiters, but also it brings in depth. If nothing else, it raises the competition level of that Oklahoma interior defensive line group. And I believe Terry is like 6'4", 320 pounds. And the Sooners did not have many guys on their team who look like that. So, these guys who can push the pocket, who can really just manhandle guys in front of them, that's something that they need. And I'm sure Todd Bates is happy to see someone like that in the locker room now.
Yeah, Philip Pye is another big guy in the middle. He is, started his career at Michigan, transferred to Utah State, was a pretty good player for sure at Utah State. What can you tell me about him?
Yeah, he kind of, similar mold of player, big guy who can push the pocket, free up space for the linebackers to go just do their thing and hit people hard. He got hurt last year at Utah State, so he missed not the entire season, but most of the season. I think he played 3 games. In those 3 games, though, he knocked down a pass. He got an interception for a guy who's 300 pounds. It's pretty impressive. So I think that, putting some of that pressure on the interior of the line, on opposing quarterbacks, is something that OU missed a lot last year. And not just last year, a lot over the past, decade since, Gerald McCoy was here, really. So I think that grabbing him out of the transfer portal, he's a 6-year player. I know some people think that they don't have they don't like the older college guys, but it usually means a lot of experience, and that they know what they're doing. They know how to lead a locker room. They know how to play the sport.
I'm not into NCAA compliance and all that stuff, and who's eligible from the transfer portal and all that stuff. I don't know. There's a lot of gray area, a lot of nebulous rules that apply and don't apply and that kind of thing. He's a sixth-year player with, I'm told, 2 years of eligibility left. How the heck does that work?
Yeah, so part of that would be the COVID year that all these guys got. And then from what I understand, the second year is from a medical red shirt. So I think that comes off of that injury from last season, maybe. I don't know exactly, but I believe that it's 1 year for the injury and then 1 year for COVID in addition.
So 3 schools, 7 years. You got a red shirt, you got a COVID, and you got a
medical
hardship.
I think so.
What a journey. We got to talk to this guy.
Yeah,
I want to know his story.
Hey, he was out there actually at the Brent Venables camp already in OU gear, helping out with the line group. So it seems like he's all in. I know the Sooners are happy to have him. I think he hit the portal in January. So he's a guy that was in the portal for a while. Knew that this was going to be something that he would be leaving Utah State, and I guess for after almost 6 months now, OU to land his recruitment, it's probably a sigh of relief.
Yeah. You hope a guy like that can come in and contribute. You hope a Jacob Lacey can have a good year transferring, and a Trace Ford coming from Oklahoma State. Mm-hmm. They're getting some guys who have been damaged a little bit injury wise that they hope can contribute, but they've got a lot of them. So maybe that's the thing, is to limit the snaps, limit the reps, and get the most out of them that you can, maximize what you can. Let's talk about some of the other newcomers, Randall, that have arrived. High school is finished. They graduated. They went to prom. They did all that stuff. Now they're college football players. They played track. They played basketball, whatever it is. Maybe they played golf. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But high school's finished, and now there are 12 newcomers on campus who arrived. The summer intersession classes that you do when you're a college football player, you start in June. You start your college academic career in June, and so a lot of these guys are here. Dave McCulloch, the defensive back from South Bend, who obviously has a big brother on the team, transfer, right, from Indiana. Yep. Cade McIntyre, tight end. I'm going to call him a tight end because that's what he told me he wants to play, and he said they're going to let him play tight end, but he could also play linebacker. From Fremont, Nebraska. Talked to him last year when we were up in Omaha, so can't wait to see what that kid can contribute. A powerlifting workout fiend.
He's a big kid
on the field somewhere and contribute. Jaquez Petaway, talked to him in Orlando. He can't wait. Met him in Orlando at the Under Armour All-American. He's from Houston, but talked to him when we were down in Orlando. He ran track this spring and won some gold medals. Absolute burner. Taylor Wine out of Nashville, Brentwood, I guess, Tennessee, an edge rusher. He got long arms. Late recruit kind of to the class, but one of those guys that just like when you see him play, you're like, holy cow, why doesn't he have an offer list from everybody? Logan Hallen, offensive lineman from Westfield, New Jersey. Sammy Omosigo, linebacker from Heartland, Texas. Jacoby Johnson out of Mustang. Coming to Oklahoma as a defensive back with the situation with Keon Brown and his eligibility. Jacoby Johnson might get his wish of playing wide receiver. So we'll see about that. Now, don't get it twisted. Don't think I'm mischaracterizing this. Jacoby Johnson would like to play wide receiver, would like a shot to play wide receiver, but he's coming to Oklahoma to play DB. We'll see how it shakes out. Makari Vickers, cornerback out of Tallahassee. Talked to him in Orlando as well. He can't wait to get going. Well, he's in Oklahoma now. He's at OU. All these freshmen have reported. Lewis Carter from Tampa. Marcus, linebacker, obviously. Marcus Strong, defensive lineman from Florida as well. Rayford, Florida, I think. Heath Ozeda from up in Seattle, offensive lineman. Another guy that committed early and has just been kind of waiting for his turn. And then Taylor Heim out of UConn, edge rusher, athlete. Who knows where he's going to play? When you got those kind of skills, there's a lot of different things you can do. What do you think about this class finally, the chosen 23 class, Randall, finally getting to campus?
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think that there's a lot of guys who could find ways, maybe not this year, but to contribute in the coming years very quickly. You mentioned some of these defensive backs, Jacoby Johnson, very, very athletic, good size. Um, if the receiver thing works out for him, I could see him getting onto the field very early, maybe not this year, but, quickly in the future. And same thing at defensive back, just with that size and athleticism. I think he's a little bit of a taller defensive back, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that I'm really excited, like you mentioned, for Heim. Just as big and as well as he moves for someone as that size. That seems like something that Coach Chavis could really mold into a good player right there.
Yeah, Jacoby, if it doesn't work out at defensive back, he could always play wide receiver. If it doesn't work out at wide receiver, he could always play basketball.
Yeah, exactly.
Porter Moser, you need basketball players. This kid can help you. So, OU is one of the few schools, I think, to offer him in both sports, and he told me several times, I want to play both sports. So hopefully that works out. It's going to be a challenge, and he knows it. We talked about that, what a difficult, demanding opportunity this is, but physically, time-wise, emotionally, to be invested for that long, you don't get a break immediately after football's over, you transition into basketball. That would be a challenge, but Jacoby, like you said, unbelievably athletic. I think he can do it.
Yeah. Another guy, Lewis Carter from Tampa. He's a fast linebacker. He loves to fly around and hit people. Yeah, man. It really not necessarily the exact same play style, but in the way that they're both from Florida, they're both fast linebackers who can fly around and hit people. Kind of reminds me of watching Danny Stutzman out of high school. Just a guy who who takes no prisoners. He will fly downhill through the gap and give you one of those remember me hits. And we saw that, at least I saw that a lot on Danny Stutzman's film whenever he was coming out of high school. He flew around the field, sideline to sideline. I think Lewis Carter, maybe not the exact same play style, but he does that a lot very well too.
There's some openings on this wide receiver core. I think Jaquez Petaway is a guy that can get in there immediately and play. I'm not saying he's going to catch 60 passes and go for 1,000 yards or anything like that, but he is going to make some plays. He's going to pop up somewhere, kind of like Freeman did last year, Gavin Freeman. Like, whoa, who was that? That's Petaway. Yeah, he's gone. Touchdown. He's got that kind of breakaway speed. He's got that kind of wiggle to him. I see him contributing in some measure, whether it's on kick returns or punt returns, or we'll see when he gets here. That's a little bit of a challenge because you've already got a line of guys doing that, as we saw several times in spring practice. But just in terms of getting him the football and getting him in space, let him run, he's going to contribute in 2023.
Absolutely. It's not often you find guys who were as successful in Texas high school track as he was that also play football.
Yeah, 10-4, I want to say.
Something crazy like that, yeah.
Yeah, maybe faster. We'll see. Sammy Omosigho is a guy I want to see as well. Makari Vickers is a cornerback. I watched him in that All-American game.
Seatbelt Vickers.
Boy, he's fearless.
Yes, physical for a defensive back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I don't know too much about the offensive lineman, but I'm sure, if Bill Bedenbaugh is recruiting you out of New Jersey and Seattle, he sees something that he likes. You can believe that this isn't some local kid that they just threw a last-second scholarship to. They went to these far-off places and different sides of the continent and brought back a couple of offensive linemen. Bill Bedenbaugh sees something.
And Ozeta committed pretty early in the process, so he was someone who held an offer for a while. Howland, I believe, was a converted tight end. Is that correct?
I can't remember.
Well, I think so. If I'm remembering correctly, Howland's about 6'7", and played tight end for his high school.
Okay, let's talk about the camp, Randall. Camp Randall. Yeah. That's your new name, by the way.
Yeah, I love it.
You love going to these camps, so I have dubbed you Camp Randall.
Perfect.
So kind of lay out what it looks like for I know it was your first time. I've never been to one of these, but just kind of what the visual looks like, what the interactions are, what's going on over here, what's going on over there, how maybe it's fast paced, maybe it's loud. I don't know if they're playing music, but just kind of lay out what it looks like for us at these Brent Venables Elite Camps, day 1 and day 2.
Yeah. So, the first thing you walk in to Everest Training Center. They're on campus. Doors are open. There's all these kids' parents are around, a lot of high school trainers, personal trainers, things like that. Like you said, there is music playing. They start every day with, just some typical position lines where they're going through stretches. Some of the OU coaches and staff will come and, just give them a short talk at the beginning of the day. And then they'll really break off into their specific position groups. So with that, you have quarterbacks, receivers inside Everest Training Center working on, their own drills. Tight ends as well are in there with them. You've got running backs and linebackers out on the track, on the football field that's inside the track. And then you have offensive and defensive linemen out. I think it's the mini field outside of the stadium on Jenkins.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where those guys are working. And you've got position specific coaches working with all these guys. So wide receivers and defensive backs, I'm watching Jay Valai coach up Malik Hawkins, Michael Hawkins' little brother, right there in front of me as they're working. I'm watching LV Bunkley Shelton and Emmett Jones coach up the receivers as they're working and things like that. Jeff Levy and some of the other coaching staff, Seth Luttrell, they're working with Mike Hawkins and Kevin Sperry while they're throwing and things like that. So from that angle, it's really a good look for us. For the media, it's a good look at, we get to be really close to these guys and the coaches. We get to see how they interact with each other. For the players themselves, if they already have an offer or are committed, it's a really good chance for them to build a relationship with the coaches, get some coaching from them. And if they don't have an offer, it's a great opportunity for them to really put their name in front of these guys. A lot of the kids there are already on OU's radar, but it's really a good chance for them to show how coachable they are and how they can compete and their body language, all sorts of things like that you wouldn't typically get watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, I've often said that the best view of things that we've gotten to have. So I've been doing this a long time. 04 is when I started covering OU, and I covered Les Miles at Oklahoma State for a couple of years. And practices were open back then. And at some point, Bob Stoops closed practices and closed scrimmages and didn't want any peering eyes and information getting out and things like that. And I totally get it. But when Brent, Lincoln was, of course, on lockdown. But when Brent opened things up to the media, 40 minutes of open practice, you get to see guys being coached. That was my favorite thing. You get to see guys interacting with their coaches yelling at them, maybe talking in a loud voice would be a better way to describe it.
Right.
What they want them to do, what their expectations are. You really start to get a feel for how the team operates. And I'm talking at the base fundamental level. Okay. Not being around any practices for the better part of the last 15 years before that, you never really had a sense of, okay, how does this team function? How do they interact with their coaches? How do they interact with each other? How do the coaches interact? And so being in that setting in spring practice and a little bit last fall for training camp really kind of opened the doors and let in some fresh air and let people see what this program's about. But when you are able to do that on a level where you're talking about recruits, you're talking about juniors in high school, sophomores in high school, I think that really shines a light as to how this program, DNA-wise, how this program builds itself.
Yeah. And I think it really also shows how dedicated this coaching staff is. I mean, I'm watching, like I said, Jay Valai is coaching up Malik Hawkins, and that kid's not even committed to OU, but he's taking the time to sit there, to take him aside and say like, hey, this is where your hand placement needs to be. Your footwork needs to be like this. And I saw that all day with tons of kids who aren't committed to Oklahoma, who might have offers but haven't decided yet. And, there's nothing assuring that these kids will end up in Norman, but the coaching staff is taking the time to coach them and treat them just like they are commits or like they are current players. And it's also really nice to see a lot of those current players out there. Jackson Arnold's out there every day. LV Bunkley Shelton's out there every day. Billy Bowman's out there. I mean, to see these guys, we mentioned Philip Paya earlier, to see these guys out there, it really shows that they care about the program and that they're bought in to helping better the program in general in any way they can.
And I think as camp counselors, to be fair and full disclosure, I think as camp counselors there, the coaching staff, the program, not the program, it's actually not related. It's disassociated technically from the program itself. I think the coaches are allowed to pay the players a stipend or a daily kind of a camp fee or whatever it is, instructor fee to go out there and help. So it's a little way for the guys to make a little money on the side. And certainly the coaches are able to supplement their income with all the kids that sign up and pay their tuition and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Campers I'm talking about. So let's finish with this, Randall. A bunch of offers. I don't know if we could call it a bunch, but there were a couple handfuls of offers made over the weekend from the Brent Venables camp. You actually got to witness a couple, which is cool.
Yeah.
But players interacting with coaches, and the end result is, hey, I'd like to offer you a scholarship. Are you ready to come to Oklahoma or something like that? Kind of lay that out for us. Describe who you saw, what you saw, and what you learned about OU recruiting some of these kids.
Yeah. So I'll start in the 2024 class because that's next up. I think the only offer that they extended in that class, I think most of those offers are done going out for 2024 class, but the one that they did extend was on Saturday. Yvonne Carrion, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He is a 6'6" wide receiver out of Odessa, Texas. So down there in West Texas. He actually is currently committed to Texas Tech. But he was recruited to Texas Tech by current OU wide receivers coach Emmett Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And Carrion was taken into Brent Venables' office with his parents. He was offered a scholarship, and that was after he performed pretty well in the morning session. I think the fact that he came to camp, even though he's committed to Texas Tech, really should tell OU fans something. I think that he's got a really great relationship with Coach Jones. I think that the fact that he came 4 or 5 hours all the way from Odessa to Norman, even though he's committed to another school, I think that really illustrates the relationship he has with Coach Jones. I don't think that his family, again, being committed to another school would make that drive for no reason. I think that there's at least going to be some consideration there. And when you look at his other offers, Purdue, Texas State, Texas Tech, nothing against those schools, but they don't have the history that Oklahoma does. They don't have the history of wide receiver production, even in recent years, that Oklahoma does. So I think when you can look and point to that, that's a really good sign for OU. I know he's
I'll interject something real quick. This might be a situation where the Emmett Jones likes him, wants to offer him, and Brent Venables and Jeff Lebby say, invite him to camp. We want to see him with our own eyes.
Right.
And if we're impressed, then boom, you get to offer him. And I think that's pretty commonplace. That's kind of probably what happened here.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. I think that a lot of these kids that show up to camp, I know that a lot of these kids get invited by the coaching staff themselves, and that is really with the goal of we want to see these kids with a closer look to see whether we think they deserve an offer. We want to get the chance to coach them, see how they respond to us, things like that. And like you mentioned, Yvonne, he in the morning session, in one-on-ones, he really performed well. Whether it was slant routes, comeback routes, deep post routes, he was beating his defender. Even at 6'6", he's able to get in and out of breaks and things like that, which is really impressive. It's interesting. I did some research, and there's not a huge history of wide receivers that are that tall. Most players that are that tall that catch passes are tight ends. So it'll be interesting to see how that looks in a college football uniform. But he's a 4-star recruit in the 24/7 Sports Composite. He's a top 200 player, so they obviously have some faith in him. He plays basketball. He runs track, so he's an athlete. It's not like he's just a big body. He definitely there's some athleticism to him, and I'm really intrigued to see what happens there. I think that he's already received a few crystal balls to OU since being offered. So I think that that one looks good right now for OU, but it's definitely going to be some work for Emmett Jones to flip him.
So there were, I think, did you say half a dozen or so offers in all? We don't need to go through all of them, but anybody jump out? Anybody stand out like this kid's probably most likely coming to Oklahoma?
Two of them did, yeah. Okay. Chase Lofton from Elkhorn, North Nebraska. and Brock Boyd from South Lake Carroll. Now, Boyd is younger. He's going to be a 2026 recruit, so there's going to be a lot. It's a long road ahead to get him. I'm assuming he's not going to commit anywhere for a while. He's still got a lot of offers rolling in. Since being offered by OU, he's received offers from TCU, Nebraska. That's going to continue. He's going to pick up more offers.
What position?
He's a wideout, 6'1", 6'2", as a rising sophomore, and his hands and his route running ability are impeccable. His dad is actually South Lake Carroll's wide receivers coach, so that might be a little bit of a reason why. But he was beating everybody. I mean, there was a route where Elijah Thomas, who's a 4-star athlete, he's got Oklahoma, Alabama offers, and beat him down the field on a rep easily. So he was making plays all day. He caught our eye, and we were talking to him. And right in the middle of us talking to him, Emmett Jones pulled him aside and gave him an offer. And I don't want to go too much into that, but I can tell you that his family was very, very moved by that. They reacted very positively. They have a great relationship with Coach Jones, who actually recruited Brock Boyd to Texas Tech last year when Coach Jones was at Texas Tech. Boyd's older brother is a receiver at Tech who was also recruited by Coach Jones. And they told me that a lot of their families from Ada. Brock's oldest brother went to OU. He's had grandparents and uncles go to OU. So that one I know that really meant a lot for him. And afterwards he threw the horns down. So I think that right now OU likes where they are with him, but there's a long way to go. They'll have to keep working that one. He's going to get a lot of offers.
If you're from Ada, you're a serious football player. I know that by experience. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. No, I'm from Ada, in case you guys didn't know. And then the tight end you just mentioned. Yeah. Tell me about him.
Yeah, Chase. So
Chase Lofton.
Yeah, Chase Lofton. If I were an OU fan, I would feel great about where this one looks right now. He told me that OU was his dream school, and that was one of the reasons that he even decided to come down to camp in Norman. So when your dream school is also the first school that offers you a scholarship, that usually bodes pretty well. Just showing that they have that faith in you, that even though no one else has offered you, they believe in you. A lot with kids, that goes a long way. Like I said, he specifically told me that OU was a dream school for him, that it was a dream to get an offer. As for his play on the field, he moves very, very well for someone who is 6'5" and over 200 pounds. He gets in and out of breaks really well. He can drop his hips. He's fast for a guy who's that big. And most guys that big don't run routes the way he does. So that's a guy that I think that Emmett Jones and Joe John Finley really liked when they saw that. He's a hard worker. Even after he got the offer, I remember watching him out there, busting his butt, working with the medicine ball in one-on-one drills where they're not even catching passes and stuff like that. So hard worker. Seems like he's going to be one that they really try to recruit hard. He said he's already planning on coming back in July for a visit. Football's in the blood. He's, like I said, 6'5", over 200 pounds as a rising junior. His brother is a tight end at Kansas State, also 6'5", over 200 pounds. So they've got some good genetics there, and seems like they really like Oklahoma.
Today is June 6th, as we said at the top of the show. 10 days from now, it'll be Champ U Barbecue.
Yep.
Any momentum about that? Any leanings, whisperings, rumors, innuendos about who's going, who's not going, and maybe why they're going or why they're not?
Well, the big name that's going to be there at the Champ U Barbecue is obviously David Stone. 5-star defensive lineman from Oklahoma originally, now goes to IMG Academy in Florida. He's got a lot of relationships still here in Oklahoma, and so he's here for the summer. I think it's been, said before, but for a guy who supposedly lives in Florida, he really enjoys coming back and spending time with the people here in Oklahoma. Apparently, he's got a pretty good relationship with some of the OU defensive coaches, which seems to be a recurring theme with a lot of guys. So that's a big one for OU. If they can impress him, he's going to be a senior. So this summer is going to be, I don't want to say the last shot, but probably the last big stretch that every school gets to make an impression on David Stone. So if they can do a good job of the Champ U Barbecue, I think that'll go a long way. Additionally, some of his friends like Michael Patterson, McDonald, some of the other guys who still play in this area, if OU was able to land them, I think that would go a long way for them because, who doesn't want to play with these kids that they grew up with, right?
Yep. Yep. Good stuff. So what's next for you? You've got some 7-on-7s coming up. You've got some more camps, more Venables camps, I guess, you might step into.
Yeah. So this Thursday, I'm going to be at the Brent Venables camp. I know for a fact that Elijah Green and Michael Patterson McDonald will be there. So there's two names that I'm intrigued to watch. I think Elijah Green is a guy that if he performs well there could get an offer. I know he's talked to OU before and he's got some other Division I offers, but if he performs well in front of some of these other kids, then I could see him being extended an offer. And then the day after the 8th, I'll be in Grapevine, Texas to watch the state qualifying tournament for 7-on-7. South Lake Carroll will be there. Allen will be there. The Frisco schools, Flower Mound schools. So there'll be a lot of good competition. I think 24 teams total. So there'll be multiple OU offers. So I'm excited to get down there, get some video, talk to those kids.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And you can find all of that and more at AllSooners.com. That's where Randall has been so busy posting all this great content. We've really ramped up our recruiting coverage, and Randall is 100% the reason why. He's got a real passion for it. So, Randall, thanks for jumping on, and we'll see you somewhere down the recruiting trail very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you guys for listening to the AllSooners podcast. We'll be back next week, and you can catch that one as well as all of our shows on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Podbean. That's our host. Just about anywhere you catch your podcast. If you have an Amazon-enabled device, just say, Alexa, play the AllSooners podcast. It's that easy. I did it the other day. My son was like, have you ever tried that? And I said, you know what? I need to try it. I tried it. It popped right up. AllSooners podcast on Alexa. It's also posted on our website, allsooners.com. Just click on the player and listen on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And, of course, all the videos of our shows are posted on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Ryan Chapman and Randall Sweet, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.